and final video on nomenclature. So far we have talked about types 1 through 3 were all different ionic compounds and ionic nomenclature. And there's been some talk about what happens if it's not ionic. Is there another type of compound? And there is. Our next type of compound is what we're learning next, which is covalent. So as a little bit of a refresher, an ionic is any time you have a metal plus a nonmetal in a compound. Covalent compounds are a little bit different, and they are a nonmetal plus a nonmetal. So we know in ionic the metal's always first. So all you have to do to know if you are looking at ionic or covalent is to look at your first element. If your first element is metal, you have an ionic compound, most likely. If your first element is a nonmetal, you know you have a covalent compound, assuming that the second element is a nonmetal. If you have a covalent compound, we have some new vocab in here, but there are a few simple rules that are very similar to ionic. So your first step is always start with your first element name. And yes, this is your full name. Just separate that. So whatever element first, here let's look, we have carbon. So I'm going to start by writing the full name carbon. After that, you are going to write the second element name. And sticking to what we've learned, you are going to be changing the ending to IDE. So here we have oxygen, which means we're going to change it to oxide. Now, obviously there is something right here that we're going to have to pay attention to, which is what? I left some space in between those elements. So our step 3 is going to be to use prefixes to show how many atoms of each type there are. So how many carbons and how many oxygens. So this is your go-to key. 1 is mono as a prefix, 2 is di, 3 is tri, 4 is tetra, 5 is penta, 6 is hexa, 7 is hepta, 8 is octa, 9 is nona, and 10 is deca. If you're in geometry, you've probably seen these before, or at least some of them should sound familiar. The only thing before we continue on, though, I do want to give you your rule number 4, and that is that you never use mono as a prefix on the first element. So if there's only one of the first element, like here there's only 1 carbon, we just don't use a prefix at all. Mono will never be the start of your naming. So if it just says carbon, that assumes there's only one of them if there's no prefix on there. But we're going to add in MON for carbon monoxide. We don't really need double vowels like carbon monoxide. It just doesn't seem right. You would cancel out that extra O. As you start to work through these, we'll start to see when you drop that vowel and how that works. So our first one would be carbon monoxide. Second one, there is only 1 carbon. So again, we never start with mono. So we're just going to go ahead and start with carbon. And now we have 2 oxygens. So that is my dioxide. SO, S is sulfur. Again, there's only one, so I'm not going to start with the prefix. Then I have one oxygen, so that's the same as what I had up here. Monoxide, sulfur monoxide. S2F is our first one where our first element has a prefix. So there are two sulfurs. So we will say disulfur. And we always include that prefix on the second one. There's only one fluoride, so this would be monofluoride. Go ahead and try the next two. Go ahead and pause this video. Go ahead and try N2I3 and S2P5. And I will put them up here in a few seconds. All right, hopefully you paused the video. If you did not pause the video until you finish those, because I'm going to put the answers up right now. N2I3 is dinitrogen, triiodide, and this last one, S2P5, is disulfide, pentaphosphide. Oops, I got ahead of myself there. It's not disulfide. It is disulfur. Remember, that first one should always be the full element name. That second one is where we cut it. Sorry about that. All right. Now, if we want to go the other way around, we don't have to do any crisscrossing because the correct prefix is right on there. So all I need to know is my prefixes. So tetra is up here. That tells me that I have 4 phosphorus atoms. Deca is 10, so I have 10 oxygen atoms. They're written in the same order that the formula is, so that means I have P4O10. Before you continue on, I want you to notice that this is your final answer. It is 4 and 10 for a reason. That's why it's named that way. Covalent compounds are the only compounds that we do not simplify. The prefixes tell you exactly what should be there. So our next one, if there's no prefix in the first one, we know that that is 1 bromine, and we have 3 oxygens. So we have BrO3. Next, we've got 1 boron, and mono means 1 times nitrogen, so this would just be Bn. And go ahead and try 4 and 5. Pause your video and complete them, and then come back. All right, I'm going to put these up. If you are not ready, pause your video, please. This should be N2O3 and Ni3. All right, so that is our fourth and final way.